Hey!
How are you?
Oh, going crazy as usual. How about you?
I'm great. All
Good
right,
stuff,
there we
good
go.
stuff. Have a good weekend?
Yes, yes. Finally relaxed and happy. Happy that it's a new week and we're done with all the election crap for a little
Oh
bit.
my gosh, I know. Yeah, I still managed to get into a disagreement with my parents over the weekend about it, and I'm just like, I cannot wait for January 20th.
Yeah, I just want this to be over where we can stop talking about it. I'm just happy to
Yeah.
not be watching it on TV. I was obsessed for a while, so I'm happy to just not
hmm
have that obsession. I
Yeah.
mean, slightly, but
Right. And now because we're in, Georgia, the next thing we have to deal with is all the Senate runoff political ads.
yes, yes. I am so tired of those people texting me too, like the little text message people.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, hard pass on
yeah.
that. Oh man, oh man, oh man. How's the family doing? I know you said your mom is officially joining your team. That's
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, she'll be joining me next year. So when you did our first photo shoot, that was for like our travel and all this
hmm
stuff. But yeah, it's time for her to retire and work with me for my business. My business really took off, so I'm like, okay, it's time.
Sounds like I need to hire you next time.
I know.
Because
Yeah.
like everything you're doing, especially like I see all the stuff you're doing on Instagram, and I'm just like, she has got it together. Oh
It
my gosh, you're
changed
killing it.
so fast. I mean, you know, your the photo shoot that we did in January was the start of me like rebranding and changing my
hmm
whole business. So like
Right,
since
right.
then, like things just started progressively just taking off. It's been crazy.
Oh, that's awesome. Now
Yeah.
I know as part of like with the new brand, and all that, you changed your name.
Again, yeah. I
Yeah,
just
so
did that.
so I don't want to mess up the pronunciation. So what's the new name?
Atelier.
Atelier.
It's
Okay.
French for like design house.
Okay.
So yeah, I studied French in college for a little bit, and I'm obsessed. So I was like, oh, that's a really cool name.
Mhm.
I don't just do design anymore, so I wanted to change
Right.
it up just a little bit, where it's still a part of it, but
hmm
it
Right.
evolved.
Right. And it sounds fancy. It sounds luxury,
Yes,
which is, part of the
the
big,
girl. Yeah,
thing you're doing. So that's fantastic.
yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm so happy for you. That's amazing.
Thanks, Mike.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All righty. Okay. Well, I guess we can just dive right into
Yeah.
the topic of this. So hi everyone. I'm Mike. If you're following this, you either know Letitia or you know me. So I am a brand and portrait photographer based in the Atlanta area. And I'm just a quirky wackadoo like that. And then Letitia, if you want to introduce yourself for anyone who doesn't know you.
Yeah, my name is Latesha Lynch. I am a brand coach that helps typically female entrepreneurs to learn to price themselves for like high ticket services that they do. So, yeah.
Cool, cool. And Letitia and I have worked together. She's hired me twice now
Price, yeah.
to do her branding photos for what is now two companies. And once COVID's over, I'm excited to hopefully, do some more work with you because whenever we get together, I think we laugh just as much as we
It's
photograph.
so much fun. You're like
Um,
the most fun photographer.
yes. Oh, that makes me so happy. Okay. So the reason we're going live today is backstory. I wanted to do a photo shoot that's a film noir type shoot, right? And I wanted to make like a comic strip and have five different scenes attached to it, right? So anyone who's not familiar with film noir, it's that old like Dick Tracy, like 1930s, 1920s, like heavy black and white detective films, right?
Yeah.
And it was a challenge by my buddy Kevin. And I was like, this sounds really cool. So I wanted to go, extra crazy with it. So again, like doing like the comic strip style. So it's five different images, five different scenes. But the other thing I wanted to flip on it was I wanted to not only gender bend, but like throw in different, ethnicities and groups for, what wasn't there during the time period. So I wanted to just completely flip it on its head.
Yeah.
And so like my detective is a black woman,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm really excited for. The client is, a gay man, and the villain is a Chinese woman. So like it
Oh, it's like
really,
a lot. Yeah.
I went the full deal.
Yeah.
And even that, like making those decisions, I was like, is there a social commentary in here that I'm not realizing that's going to piss someone off? So a lot of research went into that. But anyway, so I was telling one of my buddies about this project, which is hopefully going to happen next week. And, I was talking about like the representation that I wanted to have and flipping things. And we somehow got onto the topic of, again, talking about representation and just photographing, black people and like darker skin tones and all that kind of stuff. And like, I hate saying it like that because like
No,
I'm a straight white
like,
male and I'm like, I'm so scared. I really, really am. So we were talking all about it, and I was like, you know what? I've had clients who like constantly ask me, hey, can you light me? Can you make me look human?
Mm-hmm.
Can you do it the right way? And, does your portfolio have the representation to show that you do this work with these clients?
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? There's not enough information about this. So let me write a blog post on my website talking to this point. And I wanted to write it such that, if anyone's Googling, a photographer for themselves, if they are, black or, any kind of person of color, they could say, okay, looking for a photographer that does this, and just find them really easily.
And we Google it, like we Google everything like that. It'll be like photographer for black people.
Right. So
everything we Google literally ends with for black people.
Yeah. So like I went into one of my local SEO groups and I asked like, okay, I'm about to write this article. Number one, I'm terrified. Number two, what freaking search terms should I use to write this so that people will find it? Because I couldn't think of the terminology because I just don't think to look for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so someone, came in and said, okay, well, if you're going to write this article, didn't even address my question, but they're like, you need to look at these other factors. And I was like, oh, so that opened up a whole like Pandora's box.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I need to reach out to my previous clients and I need to see like what they did, what they thought, what I did right, what I did wrong. And so I can write this article from a perspective of like, as someone who has been told that I do a good job of this, from the client's perspective,
what am I doing?
Yeah, how did I manage this? So I want to get my client's perspective, from what they're looking for, what they do look for, what matters, and like again, even like what you've struggled with, as a client looking for a photographer who does these kind of things, or previous photo shoots, your experience with that, and selfishly, I'm looking for like a little bit of education here so I can be like, okay, how can I write this in the best way possible?
Yeah.
How can I best serve the community? And how can I also help other clients, whether they hire me or not, and other photographers so that they know, like, if you're going to shoot this community, what do you need to be aware of? What do you need to look for? How do you do it properly so that everybody's happy and we get the best images possible and everyone has, images that look like themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Very important.
Yeah. So long rant there.
No, I'm glad you gave a little bit of backstory of what you're working on, because I remember one of our early meetings, I was like, hey, so my mom complains a lot about how she's photographed. She always looks darker than usual, and I show up really aggressively bright. And that's offensive and annoying to her. And, I'm not very sensitive, but my mom is, and she's darker than me. So that was very important. But it was just easy talking to you about it. You were like, oh yeah, I have all this lighting, but we don't really believe you until you come. If I'm being honest.
Which I get it. And that's why, portfolios are such an important aspect of the marketing. Because like I talked to one of my recent wedding clients, and, they were like, one of the big things we did was like, we looked through your portfolio and said, do they have representation? Do they photograph, other people of color?
Yeah.
And, do they do it well?
Yes, that's very important.
Yeah. So I would imagine like that's the first thing that you're looking for when you're looking for a photographer is portfolio, like who is in this, Rolodex.
So, as a black person, I can just safely tell you that when I'm Googling any type of vendor, I'll be like, makeup artist for black person, hairstylist for black person, because there are just certain considerations that have to be taken into account. And then I know every photographer isn't literally going to put that in their search term, like you're trying to figure out what SEO. So the next thing is I do look at the portfolio. Is there someone that looks like me? How did that person look? That they look like I'm assuming they probably really looked in person, or were they completely changed? Did they look like they were in a shadow? Because that can happen very easily. Or did it look like they were whitewashed a little bit? Like those are all both different things that I'm looking for. Like, does it actually look like that person? And was there respect paid to that person's like tone, like skin tone? And so it is very important. So the more you can incorporate diverse clientele, and not just black people, other people of color as well, the more people can see that representation, the more comfortable they're going to feel with you, because someone else who looked like them felt comfortable.
Right, right. So, okay, so here's an interesting question: is for any kind of vendor who is not, a person of color like you that matches you already, you know, do you want to see like from someone like me, a cis, white male, like, hey, I photograph, these, communities and I do it this way. Like, do you want it spelled out or do you just want to see like in the portfolio, okay, I know they can handle it?
I
Like, does that
definitely
matter?
think that it helps to call it out because I think so if I went to a hairstylist, I wouldn't assume that a white woman would understand how to do my hair. But if she said
Hmm.
it, I was like, wow, that's awesome that she actually called that out. So I
Hmm.
think calling it out, like I photograph all skin tones. You don't have to say black people or brown people, but I think if you just said I photograph all skin tones, and then your portfolio definitely needs to reflect that.
Hmm.
But I think that it would be helpful to say it because that's an immediate comfort. That's an immediate understanding that this person gets me and
Hmm.
should be able to handle or have the equipment to be able to handle my needs in the photo shoot. So I think saying that is just a really comforting thing that people don't typically put.
Hmm.
But I think that it's clear when someone does because you'll see a lot of, like I've seen photographers that definitely don't say it, no one says it, but I have
Hmm.
seen portfolios where it's like a lot of mixtures of different ethnicities. I'm like, well, clearly that person's trying to show I can
Hmm.
photograph diverse clientele. That's just
Right.
important.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And that's great to know for me because, again, like I make sure that in my portfolio, like it is as diverse as my actual client base.
Yeah.
Um, you know, but on the same side, like for me, I'm always like, should I call this out? Do I need to address this? Or does my portfolio, have enough, voice in and of itself to say like, okay, this guy gets it. So,
Yeah. I
knowing
would say
that.
you don't need to. You don't have to. And a lot of people wouldn't say it, but I
Mhm.
think just again, if I go to your homepage and the first three pictures are just only white people or only black people, I'm going to assume that that's who you work with. I might not get
Mhm.
to that fourth picture where they start to show up. So
Mhm.
if it's not something that's prevalent, like I did earlier this year, I did a inclusive branding masterclass, and I was
Mhm.
telling them that because I'm black and all my Instagram profile is going to look like me, I specifically make sure I include other people. I'm like, I have to have someone other than that, someone that looks like me on my
Mhm.
website. All of my stock images would not include someone who looks like me because I represent that already, and then people are going
Right.
to think it's just me. So it's very important that your home page, like the immediate thing that someone sees, is very diverse from the start because they may not scroll long enough to see where you included someone else.
Okay. That's an awesome tip for anyone. That's
Yeah.
incredible. And I'm going through my head. I'm like, ooh, my like homepage, my header image literally is like fully diverse across the board. I'm like,
Good.
yes,
Yes.
I somehow nailed this.
Yeah.
Intentionally or not. I think it was intentional actually. But okay. So, and something that you also brought up is, like in the images, like even brands are using like to demonstrate the stuff on like their Insta feeds, all that kind of stuff was when we did your last brand shoot, you asked me, it's like, hey, can you bring in like a body to just like act
Yes.
like a client for me?
Yes.
And the hilarious thing was like, I invited my friend Lauren, who's this hilarious, awesome, just
I
quirky
love her.
videographer. She's great. And she's white.
And I was
And
like,
like, she
thank
got,
God. That's
but
my
that's
first reaction.
right. And the hilarious thing was like, Latesha and I didn't talk about this at all. She's like, hey, can you find someone? I'm like, yeah, I can find someone. I'm like, called up one of my friends, like, hey, you live in the area. Would you mind? And they're like, sure. And then like she arrived and Letitia's like, okay, cool, great. And it wasn't until about like, I don't know, maybe it was like halfway through or even at the end, you're like, thank you for bringing a white person in here. Cause you were like, I want the diversity. And I'm
And
like,
because
how did
nobody
I not
wants
think
to
to
say
ask
it, like instead
this?
of me being like, "Do you have a white friend that you can bring?" I'm just like, "Please bring someone and don't assume it has to be someone that looks like me." And I'm glad you didn't make that assumption because I was like, "Thank you." Now I use her picture and everything because I'm like, "See, I work with other people as well." Everyone should be very conscious of being inclusive. And if you're not that stressed out, like how we're thinking, like, "Oh, is this okay?" If you're not thinking, "Is it okay?" then you're not thinking enough. I feel about
Mm-hmm.
being inclusive because that's important. Like I was like, thank goodness he didn't assume this. And I love that I have diverse images. Even for my new photo shoot, I was like, my niece is like mixed, and then I have a dark skinned person, and then I have me. Like I was like very kind of, my best friend is like
Mm-hmm.
Latina. Like I was like, I need ethnically ambiguous people in my photos. And
Mm-hmm.
that works because for my mastermind, I got a diverse group that none of them look like me actually. And typically I would mostly get people who look just like me. So that was
Right.
important that people felt comfortable coming to me now because of the diversity
Mm-hmm.
in the images. So
Yeah. And
diverse images are just very important.
okay, that I got so much like it's so these are things that should be like duh, but like
No
you
one's
actually have to
thinking
think about it.
Yeah, no one's thinking about it. And Black people, we're very conscious. Like if I walk in a room, I will count. All of us do it, so it's actually really funny. It's like a secret thing. Every Black person counts the number of other Black people in the room. So we do. If I look at someone's website, I'm like, is there anybody? If I go to an event, I'm like, are there any people? We look for that stuff. And I think other people, like brown people as well, we noticed. People of color notice if we're not represented. And I mean, we're used to it, but we do look for it. So the fact that you at least, again, showing it, showing that you have that clientele just would bring that level of comfort with or without you saying that specifically.
Yeah. And to me, that makes sense because, again, so like photography is my side job. My day job, I'm a biomedical engineer. I'm ridiculous. And my free time, I like reading or listening to podcasts about, you know, human behavior and psychology. And one of the recent podcasts, it was some NPR show, was talking about how there are better clinical results, there are better education results when you are working with someone who is of your community and like you, because there's just like this instant credibility that exists. Which, you know, is kind of like a mind tease because you're going like, this shouldn't be a thing, but it also makes sense. And then it's like, do I want to like keep pushing on this? Like, it's a really interesting thing. So like you saying like, okay, like, you know, when I go somewhere, I'm looking for things. So for me, I go to a couple different networking groups, and one of them is a local creatives networking group called Tuesdays Together. It's a subchapter of, you know, Rising Tide Society. And at least the Metro Atlanta subgroup, I think I'm the only guy who shows up consistently. So like when I go, I'm like, are there any other guys in here? So I'm like, okay. So
you know when you're the minority in a room and you automatically will look for someone who represents you. It's just natural. So it's funny that I'm sure you're going to those. I'm in that group.
When you said it, I'm like,
only guys. There's only women who talk in that group.
So and they're always like, yes, we have a guy here, and I'm like, awesome. How do we get more? Just because I want, you know, more balance in the
group. You're probably in all of their group pictures because they're like, we have to show that there's a guy.
Oh my gosh, sorry.
They're like, hey, Mike, come get in the front of the pictures.
It's kind of like that running joke about like, you know, college like advertising pages, like you're like the token person of color that has to be in all the images. Oh my gosh.
Those are really funny. I noticed that right away. So I'm like, oh, they had to include every ethnic group in this one picture.
Right. And like even me, like, because I'm trying to learn more and more as things go on, like I'm picking up on this too. I'm going, that was intentional.
Even ads, if you look at commercials, all of these companies are like, we have to be careful. Like, I remember the first time I saw like a mixed race couple in a commercial, and I'm like, oh, and I noticed it because that was new. And we shouldn't have to notice that, but we do. We're like, oh, look at that couple. They look different. You know, you notice that right away. Everyone is being more conscious, which is good.
Absolutely. And for me, like, again, because like in doing the research for this article, I was going through all these kind of things, and I know this is a little bit of a tangent from where we're going, but I think it's an important thing to talk about is the bias in the photography industry. And this is, well, not even just photography, but I mean, film has been, especially lately, has really been hammered hard and, you know, called out for it. What was the hashtag Oscar So White? I think it was the one that came out. So again, like I'm doing the research on this, I'm reading into that, and I was looking up photography itself, and the bias in photography, like it annoyed me, but I understood because again, just the history of the US and how things go. So like, you know, when Kodak first came out with their film and they were developing the chemistry for rendering the images, they biased it for lighter skin clients because all the major ad agencies, no one was showing people of color.
That
so
makes sense.
Why expand the film? And then it wasn't until the 1970s that photographers started saying, hey, we need film with more dynamic range, with, you know, better rendering of darker tones, that Kodak finally said, okay, we'll do it. But the awful thing is that the reason the photographers requested that was so they could take pictures of chocolate and wood. It wasn't even for people.
It's very sad, but at least something brown came in where they had to photograph it the right way.
But I'm reading this going, are you kidding
and that was
me?
just 1970, so that wasn't even that long ago.
And now, you know, we're at the point where, again, because, you know, the medium and the industry is really coming under fire, or not under fire, but they're being called out for it.
Called out, yeah.
You know, and so like I think it was maybe a couple months ago now, I saw so in the industry as far as technology goes, you have a series of like off-camera flashes, and the way they talk to each other, you know, whatever mechanism, but the way they called out like the flash that controlled the other ones and the recipient was master slave flash, and it wasn't until like 3 months ago that they're like, yeah, we're gonna remove this. I'm like,
that's on everything too. It's in all of technology. Yeah. All technology still use those terms.
Right. So the industry has to catch up in that regard, like just from the technological perspective. And now with, you know, digital sensors and all that kind of stuff, everyone's going crazy with, you know, shadow depth and all that kind of stuff, which is great because you can do things. But I have a critique of that, which affects skin tone, which I want to talk about later.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect. And then, you know, now we're coming under fire as well in terms of like how you light people and how you do things. So I think it was July 2020, Vogue did a cover for Simone Biles, talking about, you know, the Larry Nassar thing with U.S. Gymnastics and all that kind of stuff. And they had Annie Leibovitz.
Which I love. Everyone loves her.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell if they were they were firing both at Annie and at Vogue.
Vogue, yeah.
One, because Vogue was, you know, they said, Vogue, you know, like, why not have a Black photographer, you know, photograph Simone Biles? Yeah. And for me, and maybe this is because I'm white, so please tell me if I'm wrong here, it shouldn't matter who's photographing the ad. It should just be like, do they represent this person well? Do they show them off in the best light, unintended? And do they make it work? You know, I understand the significance of having, you know, a Black photographer do it, but for me, I was like, I don't know.
I think the problem comes in because they typically whitewash Black celebrities on the covers of those magazines. So they're like, why not get someone, again, it's kind of the assumption with hair. I would be like, why is this blonde woman doing my hair? I would assume she's going to mess my hair up. That assumption comes in. So the assumption is if I get a Black photographer, that photographer is definitely going to know how to treat my skin when it comes to editing and lighting and all these things. So I think that that's kind of the assumption, and everyone knows Annie's work. So we already know that she's not really that great at photo, or, you know, it probably was the editing process, but she's not good at making the decision to respect the tones. So I think that that's where it came in. It's like, why didn't y'all just get a Black photographer? You wouldn't have this problem. There wouldn't be this, people wouldn't be upset. We know that Annie's the luxury magazine photographer. So I get they're going to respect her and have her do it. But if she can't handle it, or her people or her editors, and no one's speaking up, then they're going to blame it on her in the magazine. So I think that's where it kind of came in.
Yeah.
I feel like any photographer, if you're a photographer, I feel like you should understand how to up light, down light, whatever you have to do to make people look the way they need to look and be seen in the picture as a professional. And I feel like more educational things need to be in place where people are taught how to do that. You should be taught how to photograph all kinds of different skin tones. Just like if you're going to a school for cosmetology school, you should know how to do different kinds of hair, you know?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think that's part of what kicked off the whole argument in calling out Vogue and Leibovitz was that, you know, the images of Simone, they were good images, but the editing style made her skin look terrible. And part of me is wondering, like, okay, was this intentional by Annie for the sake of like?
No, I don't think. It's funny when I look at some, I'm like, I don't think that this was intentional. Like a lot of times they're like, we had no idea. Well, then have some people who look like this person in the room to help you, because we're gonna be pissed off regardless. So it's better to have that representation in the room to help you make better decisions. Like, could the editor not have been Black? if it has to be Annie, which makes sense, it has to be Annie. She should be the one photographing for Vogue. Get a Black editor, because they would help her out. They would be like, no, girl, don't do this. Or she did this lighting, I have to fix this, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, again, like those images go through so many revisions and so many reviews. Like you would think somebody would have been like,
none of those reviews included a Black person, I can guarantee. Because they would have been like, ooh, that is not how Simone looks. Or you washed her out, or she's way too dark in this picture. You can't even really see her properly. Yeah, there would have been someone that would have said something. So, yeah.
And you can have the conversation of like, I understand like the photographer, like the vision they're going for, the mood they're trying to set, but you still have to work within the confines of your subject and
Mm-hmm.
how they look and do them justice.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that I, saw immediately was like, okay, understand the style, and this would, if it was a white person, they would look great. But,
Yeah.
on a black girl, I was just like, I no.
Yeah.
Um, and that was something that, it started making me review my photographic process.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, how do I choose to photograph people? What's my approach? And some of the things that like I was walking through in my head, because when I sent you an email asking your opinion on this kind of stuff, you were like, you brought so many lights and all this stuff. And I was like,
You brought so many, like I knew you were going to take care of both my mom's skin tone and mine because you had so much shit with you. Like,
yeah,
I was like, this one dude you didn't have a second shooter. Like you had all this equipment, but I felt comfortable immediately because I felt like you were going to be prepared no matter what shadow came. That
mm-hmm.
shadow wasn't going to affect your photos. It wasn't going to piss my mom off that she looked too dark. I wasn't going to be, light hits me and I'm gone. Like I'm just gone. So I was like, okay, he's not going to make it so bright to respect my mom's tone that
Mm-hmm.
I am now washed out of the image. Like I trusted you more because I'm like, he is super prepared.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad I put forward that great impression, but, and for me, cause like, again, I was going through it cause you mentioned, I'm like, okay, well, did I intentionally do this or was it just like, okay, whatever. And I did do it intentionally because I'm like, okay, she said her mom, has really dark skin. So like, I'm going to make sure I use a flash because even though we're shooting outside, like there's going to be heavier shadow tones and I can't rely on just basic light and reflection because even though like with the new camera sensors, the shadow recovery, they have really wide dynamic range. You can like jack up your shadow slider and bring back a lot of detail.
Oh, that's cool.
It's cool, but I think people are abusing it. And this is just across the board, not even just in photographing people. When you do that, you lose detail and it does funky things to skin rendering.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exponentially worse for dark skin.
Yeah.
And knowing that, plus my own photographic philosophy of like, get it right in camera before you get to the computer to edit it, I was thinking, okay, so I'm going to need some more lights to fill in the shadows to like brighten her up, especially relative to, you, Latesha, and like fine bounce in there. But like, I'm running through all these like things. And for me, I'm like, it's not because like, okay, I'm photographing a black person, I'm photographing a white person. It's just, that's the skin tone. I'm just trying to show it off correctly.
Yeah.
And so much of that was like, even like the locations we were picking, the backgrounds we were picking. I mean, I was looking at what backgrounds contrasted well with you guys, what would still show you off really well. I was looking for accent light. So like we could separate you from the background because that's important.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're very welcome. But again, like this stuff, I'm like, I'm not even thinking about this. I'm just doing it inherently. And I don't know if it's because like, that's just how I was raised as a photographer or because I'm just innately thinking about these things. But I'm grateful and I'm a little bit of, pride here in that, like I am doing this thing inherently. And, I do have clients who are saying, yes, you did this correctly.
Yeah.
I feel like I was photographed correctly and the images look like me.
Yeah. Yeah. Every time I felt like my mom is not a hard critic, but she's always annoyed in pictures. Like if I take a picture on my phone, she's like, well, can you edit that and make it lighter so I can see myself? And I'm like, but if I make you lighter, it's going to make me too light. Like it's always an argument because we're not professionals. So the fact that you understand that there's a balance, clearly I'm not a pro, so I don't know how to strike that balance. I'm going to either look the best or she's going to be seen, It's nice to know that. Yeah, someone has to be sacrificed. It's usually her. But it's good to know that there are professionals who understand that there has to be some sort of balance and you know how to strike that balance. And you do a great job of that. Like I said, I've worked with you twice. She was also in the second set of photos. We were in indoors one time, outdoors once, and both times I never felt like, oh, I'm just blending in with some darker backgrounds. Like especially that one, I don't know if you remember, we're sitting at like that table at like Cafe Intermezzo. Well, the background of Cafe Intermezzo was actually pretty dark because it wasn't like they weren't working yet, but we are still seeing, like you can actually see us really well. So I'm like surprised. Like I'm always really surprised if someone gets it right, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Well, and again, part of that was, because I remember the exact restaurants. It's that one Russian restaurant over in Avalon. Yeah. And I remember like one of the reasons I picked that spot was because one of the nice things about this area, Avalon, is it's, it's all outdoor outlet shopping and like restaurants. and it's a lot of concrete, and it's all
Yeah.
bright concrete. And
Yep.
we shot on like kind of an overcast, but still bright day. So I was like, okay, I can see them here. The light's coming in this way, so it brightens up that background, which was like a
Mm-hmm.
really dark, front facing wall. But also because the light's coming in, like I had the natural reflector of the concrete and like the tables, because the table was like a light wood. So
Yep.
like I was getting like fill light all in your faces, and I'm like, just all day, let's shoot here,
Yeah.
you know? Because again, like I think about those things as a photographer, and yeah, I would do the same thing for someone who like me personally, like my eyebrows or like my brow is very forward relative to my eyes,
So
so I
then
get
you wouldn't, yeah.
shadows really easily.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking for natural reflectors or adding reflector to fill that in, so I don't look like a raccoon. It's just how we describe it usually as photographers, like, don't give him raccoon eyes, and I'm like, well, yeah. So like just skin in general, that's something I look for.
Yeah.
So, and that's like a tip I recommend. Like, again, in this article I'm posting, I'm going through, how to choose a photographer, which is look at their portfolio, ask them, like,
Yeah.
what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like, do you have experience with this? Do you know how to light someone with
Yeah.
my complexion or, whatnot? And the other thing that I think one of my other clients brought up, and you brought it up earlier, was, hair and makeup artists. Again, I was just like, oh crap, this makes sense.
You have to literally add 4 Black people. I can tell you if you bring in a hair or makeup artist, you need to make sure that the person knows what they're going to be working with. Like even like I don't even know how to match makeup to my complexion because of my undertones. So I don't know how to do it. I need a professional makeup artist who understands. I don't care how they look, but I'm not going to trust them if I don't see their portfolio, because you have to know what you're doing. And there's a lot of browns. Black people have a lot of different undertones, and we're all different, like hue. Like it's crazy. Yep. You don't know who you're gonna get, so you have to be prepared. Like you have to mix makeup to match my face. I can't just get something from the store. It has to be mixed. It's so annoying. So
oh my gosh.
It's very difficult. And God forbid it's the summertime. Who knows what complexion I'm going to be? And then the winter, you don't know. So that you have to look for, if I get like, you're going to want to work with vendors. If you're doing a wedding, then you're going to have to work with other vendors. Well, all of that has to be considered, that you're going to know how to deal with that, including their family. Like it's going to be a whole rainbow of people. Like you have to be prepared for that stuff. So just keeping in mind that, yeah, if you're great at doing makeup or photos, like it might be something that you include in your SEO, because that is something that we're going to type in. And it's very common knowledge in our community that we're going to look and add for Black people at the end.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
very, very natural. Yeah, we do it every time. There's a whole thing on Pinterest where you can see where it's added. Like if I type in anything, it'll be someone definitely search for Black woman, for Black women, for Black men.
Gosh,
we're not going to Supercuts to get our haircut for a reason. We got to be very careful.
yeah. No,
you know
for sure.
I mean? Like we have to be very careful. We might get jacked up. Looking
bad
in
it
pictures.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And so going back to what you're saying about undertones, I actually, because you brought that up and I was like, undertones, I had research and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a thing.
Red undertones are like yellow, and it can mess you up in the picture.
Yeah. So I did a little bit of research on this. So anyone who, even if you want to do a selfie, this is great information.
Okay.
A way to look at this is look at the underside of your wrist and look at your veins. Okay. If you have blue veins, that means you are warm toned.
Okay.
So look for backgrounds that are earthy. So, browns, oranges, reds, rust kind of stuff. If your veins are green, that means you are green. So cool tones are best for you. So you want to look for silvers, blues, water type tones. So like, I was like, oh,
that's
so now I have to have the really awkward conversation of, okay, hi client, nice to meet you. Can I see your wrist, please?
That's actually really funny. I would be like, hi, nice to meet you.
Right. I'm like, what kind of weird handshake is this? Like, what are you doing to me?
That's really fun. I did not know that. You just taught me something new. Now I'm staring at my wrist like a weird person. It is definitely green though.
Well, and now it'll help, because like I remember like for your LinkedIn headshot that we did, it was a very white background, it was very light, and I really liked it. But at the same time though, like we did that shot at Avalon in that one alcove with you like in white top and the yellow dress, and I'm like, the warm tones look awesome in that. I'm like,
Now we
screw
know
this
why.
argument. It looked great. But
Yeah.
like, ah.
Yeah, you don't know. You never know. Depending on the lighting, I could show up very differently. Something's
Yeah.
up with my skin. My skin is weird. Like, yeah. I told you, I can't find makeup. There's something wrong.
I think it's just skin in general because it changes based on so many factors.
Yeah.
And again, like different skin tones absorb color differently,
Yeah.
which is a big part of it too. So like I know, and this goes just across the board for like darker tones take color really, really well.
Yeah.
So like I love shooting with gels and doing stuff like that. So if I have, you know, a person of color as one of my clients, I can really go ham with my coloring and just like it's gorgeous silhouetting, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But if I'm shooting, you know, a white person, I'm like, I really have to work it to make it show up, which means increasing the power and doing all these kind of fun things. But
yeah,
you know,
no,
that's
it
just
makes sense. That's
technical.
what fashion. That's why in the fashion industry, if there's like a darker person, they always make them wear like the cool, like the yellow or the red, because those colors for their fashion line is going to really pop on that runway. It makes sense. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah,
I'm very careful with the colors I wear. I typically will wear white in my.
Yeah, typically. Okay, so we've been talking for a little bit. I want to try and wrap this up. So
hey, Fiona.
What I want to go through is
Fiona from the brand side. I love her.
Oh, very cool. Hi. Hey, I'm glad we can help you with that tip. That's great. Helping out everybody. So yeah, what I wanted to ask was, you know, can you like, if you're looking for a new photographer, you know, or just, we'll say photography just for this instance, but some of this can be applied to other vendors, you know, can you give us like a 5-item checklist of things that you would like look for or ask for so that you would feel confident, you know, working with them?
The first thing is I would ask them, do they typically shoot someone of color, and do you have examples? Because that's important to see. I want to see the range of the complexions. I would ask them, do they have like lighting options that, you know, are we shooting indoor, outdoor? Because that's going to be very important as well. I think I would also ask about like the location, not just indoor, outdoor, but can I see the location as well? What colors are there? And then just what colors should I be wearing so that I show up well? Because that's important. Like you gave me like a style guide, and that thought, I talk about that a lot. Like I have photography clients for my coaching business, and a lot of them are brand photographers. I'm like, hey, if you're going to step up your game with your business, your photography business, and your package, you should definitely, as a nice part of adding value, help people out with what they're supposed to wear, because they need to know if they're going to be in a location, like you said, with a darker background or like warm tones or whatever else you said, all the scientific stuff, they're not going to know what to do to show up well in that. Right. We only know so much about our complexion we don't know how it's going to professional.
Yeah. Those are awesome tips. I'm really glad. And I'm actually going through my head thinking, I just found out about this undertone tip with your wrist. I'm going to add that into my, you know, clothing guide. Because again, I just found this out like 2 days ago when I was doing the research for this blog post. And I'm like, this is gold.
Yeah.
So definitely going to add that in. But okay, so those are awesome tips. Really appreciate it. And, you know, as a photographer, I'll, you know, give a couple of tips as well that just help other clients, you know. So again, like you said, ask for a portfolio, ask them questions. How are you going to tackle this? What do you recommend? You know, I find that better photographers have stronger opinions.
Yeah.
And will really help guide you through like what they think makes the most sense for your shoot, because they'll help you pull everything together and coordinate things. You know, you can ask them, hey, like what vendors are you going to bring in to work with me, you know, and do they have experience working with, you know, my complexion, you know, and my different attributes, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and then in terms of like the actual photography thing, again, like the undertone trick, definitely be mindful of that, because that's a new like gold item.
Yeah.
You know, try to avoid dark backgrounds, especially if you have dark hair and like the darker your skin.
Yeah.
Unless you have a very, very direct light source that's just on you to separate you from that background, you're going to get lost.
Yeah.
So definitely be mindful of that. And then, one other trick is like if you've got a group of people, all different skin tones, whatnot.
The worst. I already rolled my eyes because that's so stressful. I'm like, I already know I'm not gonna look good.
Yeah, take it when you're setting that group up. Whatever your light source is, put that light source either move the light source or move the person with the darkest skin closest to that light source.
That's smart.
And then the lightest person furthest away, because the way the light like dissipates and travels, it'll balance everybody out more or less.
That's actually really smart. From now on, when I'm doing pictures, I'm just going to let you know that I'm going to be like, where's the sun? Hey, move. I need to be here.
Yeah, exactly. So be mindful of that. And then once you actually get to editing the photos, it's, again, this is my philosophy, but I think it really matters for, you know, people of color, is photograph it at the correct exposure in camera, because in your editing software, if you underexpose it and you know, really crank up your shadow slider recovery, you're going to distort the skin tones and you're going to make it look ashy. You're going to flatten it out and it's going to look a little gray, or it's going to add a lot of weird orange tones depending on what the base color is.
Yeah, I do that. I'm
so
such an editor. I'm always orange.
Just, yeah, take a couple of like just basic like mobile editing classes and they'll teach you some of that stuff. Okay. The other thing that's really helpful is that if you want to bring in some rich tones, is there's also the highlight slider. Most people, me typically, I decrease the highlights because I'm trying to remove shine, remove sheen.
Yeah.
On people of color, I will increase it because it really brings out like the richness in your guys' skin tones, and it looks amazing. It looks awesome. So if you are going to raise the shadows, if you are going to raise the highlight slider, also increase your contrast, because you'll bring some pop and punch back into the images. Because when you raise those two sliders, highlights and shadows, you'll actually lose some definition and flatten the image a little bit.
Yeah.
So just those quick little things to help bring it all together. Yeah, so those are my quick tips and all that. That'll be part of the article. And Latesha, thank you so much for your time with this. This was amazing. Really appreciate the conversation.
I need another photo shoot.
Yeah, or even just hanging out with you and your mom.
Huh?
I know. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that'll be great. I'm still shooting right now, which, blessing and a curse. You know, I'm doing the 6 feet thing, masked all the time, and we'll see how it goes. But it's fun. But yeah, I can't wait to work with you guys again. I just want to hang out with you and your mom.
I know, right?
My mom so hard.
About you every few months. She's like, "How's Mike? How's Mike doing?"
Oh my goodness. Well, that makes me feel great, because like,
you're a great photographer. You're like fun. You're very, very fun. A good person. We already felt like you were our family.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. And yeah, that if I can do anything with my clients, it's have a great experience with them. We get good photos. Like, yes, that's the goal. But like, if we're not having fun, even if I get great photos, I feel terrible about it. So I'm glad that you guys had such a great experience working with me. And again, I cannot wait to work with you guys. And I'm probably going to bug you at some point about like upping the brand stuff a little bit, because I'm working on changing some things up and upping my ticket prices. So you and I need to talk offline.
That's all I focus on. That's my only focus. I talk to a lot of photographers too. So I'm like, your work is so good. You need to be charging more. I get a lot of questions about pricing stuff. I'm like, well, this is how much I paid for my last shoot. This is what I will pay. People will pay this. Like, you guys are like making brands. Like, my whole brand changed just from the photos. Like, it's important.
Right. Well, and the other thing too is not even just like the quality of the images, it's the full experience around it. It's just, there's so many other factors that go into.
Yeah. All the like that he gave us. That was very important. I was like, that was such a valuable tool. I knew how to dress, but my mom wouldn't. So she wanted that guide. So having that, I talk about you're doing that all the time to other photographers. I'm like, you should have something like this. This is great. This is a great tool.
Yeah. Woo, I'm doing things right.
Yes. That's awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
So absolutely. And again, thank you so much for having this talk with me. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to make this interview part of the article I write, because I think it went really well, and there's a lot of great information in here. You know, hopefully some other people will get something good out of it. And again, it was just great catching up with you. Really proud of your success, which has been phenomenal. Kudos. And yeah, I guess we'll sign off.
Bye.
So I'll get stopped. Right. Have a good one, Latesha.
You too.